Hi there, welcome to a weekly segment of the Cytonn Report. I'm your host, Teresia Kengara. This week, we get to revisit the issue of the IMF standby facility after Treasury announced that it would not be renewing the credit facility, despite having requested for an extension in March of this year. And with me on the show today is Cornelius Awondo, an investments analyst at Cytonn. Cornelius, karibu.
Asante.
And maybe to start us off, give us an implication of if the government fails to take the precautionary standby facility, what happens then?
One of the implications is that the shilling might depreciate as a result of reduced investor confidence in the economy, because the foreign investors usually view this IMF facility as a safety net for their foreign investments. Another effect is that there might be adverse adjustments in the balance of payment positions of the country because of now the depreciated shilling. It might make our imports more expensive, because mainly we import oil from OPEC countries, so our imports will be more expensively priced. And then now these capital outflows by foreign investors are withdrawing their capital from the market, so it will cause a net outflow of foreign capital as opposed to the inflows, as in what you are receiving in the market versus what is going out. Then all of this will result into reduced investor confidence in the economy due to the depreciating shilling and now our more expensive debt, and now that the safety net is taken away, investors might view Kenya as a risky investment destination.
And maybe just to revisit the just concluded economic review by the IMF, maybe you could give us a bit of the highlights that the IMF noticed when they were doing the review for the country.
The IMF completed their reviews in March 2018, and among the key takeouts, one was that the economy has grown from last year, because the economy expanded by 5.7% in Q1 2018, as opposed to an expansion of 4.9% in 2017. Now, this was as a result of improved weather conditions this year. We've experienced enough rains up to now, and then improved investor confidence as witnessed by a 2.1% increase in tourists that are coming into the country through JKIA and maybe more international airports in Eldoret, and also the recovery of businesses as a result of the end of the election cycle, the prolonged election cycle that we saw last year.
Prior to the government talking about that they'll not be seeking to renew the standby facility, when it actually sought to have the standby facility extended, there started commitments that it had committed to, so that we could get access to the facility. Maybe you could give us a bit of a background on some of these commitments that the government was talking about.
When the government applied for an extension of the IMF facility beginning September 14th, it had given 4 commitments to the IMF that it will abide by, so that they would qualify for the facility going forward. Now, one of them was fiscal consolidation. The IMF required the government to narrow the fiscal deficit to 7.2%, and also to look at the current debt obligations of the country. Now that they had concerns that the debt to GDP might widen to, or might increase to 60% of GDP by the end of the financial year, that is 2018-2019. The second commitment was the removal of the interest rate controls. Now, the IMF has expressed concerns that the interest rate controls have dampened private sector credit growth, and they've also reduced taxes from the banking sector due to reduced revenues or reduced profits. And also they are saying that it's making the monetary policy framework ineffective. But the government failed to repeal the interest rate cap legislation, which was provided for in the Finance Bill 2018. It was taken to the president for assent on last week, but then the president did not sign it and instead returned it back to Parliament for reconsideration. The third commitment was the monetary policy framework rationalization, which was supposed to be effected once the interest rate controls are removed by Parliament. Basically, this was to target a more inflation-targeting interest rate regime. But then, since Parliament did not repeal the interest rate controls, now this commitment, you couldn't proceed forward with this commitment because it was tied to the commitment of interest rate control removals. The other reforms that the government had promised to the IMF was increasing government revenues by widening the tax base and also rationalizing government expenditure in order to, reduce the budget deficit. Yeah, so the government made efforts to increase revenues by introducing certain taxes. One, we had the introduction of the Robin Hood taxes that required banks to pay 0.05% of amounts transacted above 500,000 shillings. And also there was the introduction of the National Housing Development Levy that required employees to contribute 0.5% of their gross salary to this fund, and then employers to match the same contribution. Now, these taxes were rejected by Parliament on the premise that the Treasury had not engaged the public to voice their views on these taxes. And Parliament was saying that these taxes will increase the cost of living for Kenyans, and they will also, bring about the issue of double taxation of citizens.
We know that the government is talking about stable macroeconomic conditions as part of the reason why it did not seek an extension of the standby facility. Could what you've talked about be also part of the reason that it did not seek an extension on the same? Its failure to meet most of the obligations?
No, I wouldn't say it's failure to meet the commitments, but the Treasury gave the reasons that the macroeconomic fundamentals have been kept stable during the year. We've had the shilling appreciate by 1.9% year to date, despite the government not having drawn down on the IMF facility, which was existing at that time. And also the central bank contains forex reserves worth $8.5 billion US, which is equivalent to 5.7 months of import coverage. Now, this, according to the central bank, is enough to cushion the shilling from depreciating further in case of economic shocks. But
you've talked about part of the implications or repercussions of us failing to extend the facility is a weakened shilling and the ripple effects of a weakened shilling. So maybe you could give us a future outlook, or what Cytonn is talking about when it talks about government's failure to extend the facility. What does the future look like? Is it that the shilling continues to stabilize, or do we expect a weakened shilling and the ripple effects of the same?
We do not see an immediate threat to the economy with regards to the government rejecting the IMF facility, because one, we have enough forex reserves for an import coverage, for 5.7 months import coverage, because I mentioned earlier that you have $8.5 billion US in the forex reserves of the central bank. Now, this should keep the shilling from depreciating further. And I had mentioned that the shilling depreciated by 0.2% last week, but the central bank pumped in the dollars that it has to mitigate the effects of the depreciation. And number two, now we've had a 1.9% appreciation of the shilling, despite the government not having drawn down on the IMF facility. So, which means that we are out of the red when you talk about the shilling, because it was supposed to give us a buffer when it comes to the shilling depreciation, but then the shilling has appreciated 1.9% basically, but we've not drawn down on the IMF facilities, which was supposed to provide a buffer for the same. So yeah, the macroeconomic fundamentals of the country remain strong, and also from an IMF representative was quoted saying that Kenya remains in a strong position outside there. So yeah, there's no immediate economic threat to the country.
Okay, thank you, Cornelius. There you have it. The macroeconomic fundamentals of the country remain strong. Until next time, kwaheri.